Hello, Frank. How are you?
Shalom, Rabbi. Doing well, thank God. How are you, sir?
All right. Glad to be back in the Holy Land. Had a good trip, a successful trip. It's a long trip, but we're back.
How long of a flight is that?
Well, there's no direct flight, so you can fly through the United States, which would be about let's say to Miami or somewhere like that, and that would be about I guess, a 12-hour flight, and then from there another, let's say, 5 hours to get to the city that we need to. But usually, then you need to make sure that you have enough time to make the connection, so you have to wait a few hours in the airport. We did it through Switzerland and coming back through Frankfurt, Germany, and total traveling time with the waiting around was about 23 hours.
That's a long day.
Yeah, it was a long day. Just, I think you have to go with the right attitude, patience, and hope that the planes will be smooth, it will be on time, and that they'll have some kosher food on the plane for you. Because obviously, I travel and I ask for kosher food. But I always take some spare food, emergency food, usually just fruit and maybe a sandwich. You don't really need to eat on the plane. It's usually better not to eat on the plane, especially if you want to sleep. So coming back, I spoke to the air crew, the people in charge of the meals, and I said, I ordered a kosher meal. Can you check? They checked, yes. And I said, you're going to be serving it about 2 hours after takeoff, an hour after takeoff, and it's a night flight. I said, you know what? Hold the meal for me. Don't wake me up. I'm going to just try to go right to sleep. And if you don't mind, I might ask you for the flight if I get hungry later on. If it's not too much trouble, they were very nice. It was Lufthansa Airlines, and I didn't even eat that meal. I said, I don't know. I wanted to go to sleep, and you sleep better not on a full stomach. Um, and I just had a snack in the morning when we before we landed, just to keep me going, because we still had hours to go till we got on the Israeli flight, this flight to Tel Aviv. So thank God we made it all right. I did what I had to do, saw some old friends, and so on. So it was good.
That's great. That's great. Well, Rabbi, we're a little early today, but we left off with chapter 8. Uh, you had been going through proper conduct in chapter
Right.
8. We were down to item number 4, improper conduct.
Okay, I've got it open. I'll share it. Let's get going.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, I haven't. Hold on just a second. I'll fix you up here. Sorry. Let's see. There we go. See if that got you going.
right. Okay, everyone. Sorry we had a miss last week. As I think I mentioned, I was traveling down to South America where I'd once served as a rabbi, and now I'm back, and it's good to be back in the Holy Land. And we have our own problems here; they have their problems there. But God bless you all for. I hope you're enjoying these classes, and thank you, Frank, for facilitating them. So we're going through a book called the Brit Shalom, the Covenant of Peace, which is sort of a guideline for people who consider themselves Noahides and want to try to observe the laws and the values of being a Noahide, which are seven. And our mentor here in Israel at the Noahide World Center, Rabbi Oury Cherki, he composed a book. He's one of the few that has done this, a book that outlines and expands on the seven, because they're all rational ideas, or call them commandments: not to steal, not to murder, treating animals properly, and not worshiping idols, false gods. So they're all rational. You don't need to be a big believer. As long as you already believe in the one God that expects us to behave in a certain way, then with our moral compass, and we believe that God, Hashem, the Creator, instilled in every human being a moral compass. We're not always in touch with it. Sometimes we're making mistakes. Sometimes we ignore that compass out of laziness, envy, anger, or tired, and we're just fatigued, spiritually or physically. So, but these are all not, pretty obvious for a moral thinking person. What Rabbi Cherki did, and I'm sure many of you have felt this, okay, but how do I apply this to my everyday lives? The seven Noahide laws, six out of the seven are things that I'm not allowed to do, prohibited: not to murder. When was the last time you had the thought to murder someone in a serious way? Stealing, you know you're not supposed to. So Rabbi Cherki has done, he's looked at the other side, if you want, of the coin. So what does this mean? What is the value, the underlying value or principle in a moral compass or with our spiritual understanding of things? Not to murder stems from the value of life. Life is valuable. It's a gift of God, the greatest gift that God gave us. So then, okay, if I love life and I have to respect and love, or at least be in awe of other people's godliness, then what does that mean? How am I supposed to behave towards them? So we're going through now the law that deals with not causing separate suffering to animals, needless suffering to animals. The law is usually just formulated as you shouldn't eat from the limb, flesh of a living animal. You shouldn't tear it apart before it has died. So the positive side to that is how we're supposed to treat with positivity and other species, definitely human beings, but now we're even other species, lower, less complicated and sophisticated species of human beings. And that's what we're going through now. So let me try to share it on screen. I can also tell you that I was in Colombia, South America, and it's a Catholic country, and I had served there years ago. And when I don't dress that like they do, or look like many of them. I also wore my kippah. The areas that I was visiting, I didn't have to fear that, and I knew they were looking at me with curiosity. And I was generally introduced to the people who didn't know me, non-Jews, as I'm from the Holy Land. I'm a rabbi from the Holy Land, which for Christians that are not anti-Semitic or haven't been brought up that way, they respect the Holy Land. And I actually pointed out, I live quite near Bethlehem, where I assume they've heard of it in an historical way. And generally their attitude was quite positive. Some of them actually came out and said, we love the people of the Holy Land and so on. I would say they haven't been contaminated or somehow, let's go contaminated by the anti-Semitic attitudes towards many Christians and non-Christians in Europe and in the United States. Not everybody, obviously. There are many good folk like yourself, and there are people that aren't Noahides that also don't believe in the lies that are that Israel and Jews are being accused of, but some are still being taught that in the church. Okay, so hopefully you can see on screen this from chapter 8. No, what chapter is this? It doesn't make a difference. So we're going through what Rabbi Cherki called in this book. He called it proper conduct. Now, it's the first chapter, the first part of each chapter, he lays out what is the actual law, and then he goes prohibited or obligatory. And then in the proper conduct, he says, okay, if you believe that animals are from God, they are creatures of God, and they were given to human beings, put in this world for their beauty, for what we can get from them to serve us but not to abuse them. They are God's creatures. So we're number 4, I think you said. Okay, so hopefully you can see on screen, number 4, paragraph number 4 here. Whoever finds a nest in a tree, in the forest, in the woods, not on your own property. Whoever finds a nest and wants to take the chicks to raise them, to cultivate them, possibly to eat them later, or the eggs that are in it, must first chase away the mother and then take them in, and then take them. So this is a law written in the Torah. Again, I always say this, I want to admit this humbly. I'm not very good with the chapters where these things appear in the Torah. I know it's in the book of Deuteronomy. I could find it pretty quickly because I know the Torah and I usually learn the Torah according to the way it's divided up into weekly readings. That in Jewish synagogues, Jewish communities around the world, we read a chapter or 2 or 3 sometimes from the Torah, from the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses. They are divided up into 54 weekly sections, and we read usually 1 every week, sometimes 2 if we need to catch up in the calendar. So I know exactly where this is and which week we read it. So don't hold me, don't feel that any lesser of me, please. So this is written in the Torah, in Scripture. God commands the people of Israel that if you want to take the chicks and the eggs, you are allowed to, but do it out of sight of the mother. Why is that? The assumption is it's a cruel thing to do because we know the mother hen or chicken or whatever it is, bird, will protect, instinctively, will protect its offspring. And therefore, you taking it when it can see it, that's cruel. Now, whether the animals actually have feelings or it's just this sort of automatic reaction to them, that's irrelevant. And Maimonides, amongst other Jewish thinkers, has discussed this. The main things, and I think this is Ramban, Maimonides' attitude, is if you, that somebody who wants to be compassionate towards other human beings and everything, and just be a compassionate person, then you shouldn't do a cruel thing like this because it goes against the idea, your notion, your will to be compassionate. So that's the way he explains it in a logical way. Whether the animal feels, you see the animal, you might see it, whether it's chirping, hovering around. So you know that you're causing pain at some level. So therefore, again, you must first chase away the mother, and then you take them. Why? In order that the mother should not see her offspring being taken away. It doesn't have to be necessarily the mother. I can't tell the difference between a hen, I guess, and a cock or whatever it is, the male and the female. But you see the bird hovering over, it's protecting its offspring. Don't take it when it's still there, when it's still in eyesight. Chase it away. So you should not take it until she or he cannot see it. But it is better not to take them at all, right? Especially if you're not going to eat them, if there's some other reason. The idea is not to act in a cruel way. Maimonides, in one of his works, sort of acting or as a Dr. Phil, as a psychologist, he said, and I forget what it's called in psychology, it's a field there in education. If you want to become a compassionate person, do acts of compassion, even if you don't feel it. For instance, in Colombia, there are a lot of beggars in the streets, especially at traffic lights when it turns red. Now, I know in Colombia too, some people are afraid to lower the window and, put their hand out or, to give some money to the poor person. And I can understand why. There's too much violence going on. But it's up to you to evaluate it. And if you see somebody that doesn't look dangerous, so the person who was driving me around there, the president of the Jewish community, I was pleased to see he had little, small denomination of bills that anytime somebody stopped or came up to the car, and of course, he must have looked and evaluated the situation. He would give them something. So again, and the idea is do acts of compassion and you will it'll change your nature, your character. That's what Rambam believes. So what is he, a behavioral psychologist or whatever? And the same thing, you want to be more, so you can change your character. Could take years, but you have to persist at doing the actions are the actions of a person of that type. Could be humility. You feel like you're too proud of yourself. You're too haughty, I think, to be the word. I don't think anybody uses that anymore. Okay, then think, how would a modest, humble person behave? And you start behaving like that, even again, if you don't feel it at the beginning. The idea is if you want to become that type of person, then act like that. And don't say, well, only when I feel it. You might never feel it. The same thing here. This is the way that Maimonides explains it in a rational way. We should all be compassionate human beings towards every living creature and and especially towards human beings. So therefore, act like it. And therefore, we explain this mitzvah. And Noahide, even though it's not one of the seven, but again, as Rabbi Cherki sort of explains it and expounds on this, Noahides are expected to be and are obligated to be moral, upstanding, righteous people, right? Honest people, compassionate people. And it is part of the in between the lines, if you want, of the seven. Number 5, it is not proper to eat meat or drink wine in excess. Why he put it in this one? And again, he's not saying you can't. It's not proper. You have godliness inside of you. First of all, eating too much meat is not good for your health. We know that. We know it's also not good for the environment. The amount of pollution from all the animals that we're consuming is not good. So for many, and besides, realize you're killing a living creature in order to you could say you need nutrition, but also a good steak, good burger, I'm in favor, but don't in excess. And the same thing, definitely drinking wine. Wine is permitted in Judaism. But obviously, don't do it when you're losing control. Don't do it to the excess of you losing control or when you become addicted to the alcohol. And of course, there are too many people in the Western world that are addicted to it. They can't manage without it. A little bit to take the sting off of a long day or of a throbbing headache. That's one thing. To feel a little bit jovial, especially on the Shabbat or celebration, that's all good. But if you want to be a proper, upstanding that won't make mistakes because of these things and doesn't lose control, then definitely don't drink wine in excess and don't be a glutton, I think would be the word. Number six, blood from a slaughtered, undomesticated animal. That would be like a deer, not a sheep or a lamb that's in pasture or a cow. Blood from a slaughtered, undomesticated animal. Whether it's kosher or not, you decide what you want to keep. You don't have to keep kosher. But if it's slaughtered, it's bleeding for whichever way you killed it, or from a slaughtered bird, again, not a chicken or a turkey, should be covered with earth. Pardon me, I made a distinction that's wrong. Chickens and turkeys, even though they're domesticated, we still cover the blood with earth. And I've done this because I've acted as call it a ritual slaughter. I didn't like it, but for my community, I didn't have a choice. At least I wanted to provide them with kosher meat and poultry. So when we slaughtered the first few chickens, a little blood was let to drip down on the ground, and I had some earth ready to cover it. There's actually a blessing that a Jew would recite a blessing, the Jew of the ritual slaughter, which most Jews have never slaughtered an animal. Again, it's a way, if you want, paying respect to the animal and to that it was a living creature. That God put some kind of spirit into it. It's not a machine. It's not just flora or rocks. So God gave us permission to eat it, as long as we're going to eat it and not just, wantonly destroy these creatures. Then we should show respect. And of course, blood is, as few places in the Torah, Jews are not allowed to, it's mentioned a few times, not allowed to eat blood, drink blood, or anything like that. So again, we're not going to eat or drink this blood, but it should be covered, paying respect. And again, it should be a way of reminding us how precious life is. Definitely human beings, human life, but also of animals. Seven, whoever wants to be strict with themselves and eat only kosher foods, again, we're not talking about Jews. Jews are obligated. There are Jews that don't keep the kosher laws, even eat pork. I think that's wrong, but it's their business, right? Whoever wants to be strict, now a Noahide, who wants to be strict with himself and eat only kosher foods, you don't have to, right? It's only for these laws of not eating pork, not eating a cheeseburger because of the cheese and the meat, and some other things like that, shrimps, lobster, and so on. You can eat it if you want, if you're not Jewish. But if you want to be strict with yourself, because you feel, if God commanded the Jews of these things, there must be a reason for it. And these things are mentioned very clearly. The laws of the animals that I just mentioned before, very clearly in the middle of Leviticus, or the beginning of Leviticus, and repeated again towards the beginning of Deuteronomy. So according to the laws of Judah, you can do so, right? And you can may even accept upon themselves a portion of the laws of kashrut. You're allowed to. Now, actually, Rabbi Cherki's attitude is non-Jews, as long as they're doing it because they believe this is what God wants, not obligated, they're allowed to keep every law of the Torah, or nearly every law of the Torah. So I don't know why he words in that way. Maybe because he was asked quite often, should a non-Jew, or Noahide might have asked him, our mentor, do I have to keep the laws of kosher? Is it a good thing for me to keep the laws of kosher? I don't think Rabbi Cherki really has an answer for that, because these laws are for the Jews, but it does say that these animals will make you impure. So again, we're not sure what exactly that means, except that we believe that every human being has a godliness, a godly neshama, soul inside of them. And what's the matter of eating pork? I'm not even talking about the hygiene problems of certain, pork if it's not, whatever. But we believe that this does damage to our souls. So is it only Jewish souls, if there is such a thing, are damaged by this, or really any human being who wants to elevate their soul, their spirituality, so that it will be a source of pushing them in the right direction upwards towards getting close to God, so they would want to do this too. You don't have to, but you can accept upon yourself even a portion of the laws. You decide you're not eating pork, you're not eating a cheeseburger, or whatever it is. Or the bottom feeders, I think, which would be lobsters, crabs, shrimps. Okay, so Um, and again, now he brings some of these laws. Here are some of these laws. Not to eat treifa or treifa, which means unfit meat. What is unfit meat? That is meat from an animal with a fatal defect. What does he mean by this? A ritual slaughter is supposed to check the animal that the animal was healthy before he slaughtered it. It doesn't mean that it was contaminated. It just means it might have had a punctured lung, for instance. That's one of the examples. Animals that are in pasture, not fed in a silos or pens or whatever they are. So animals in pasture have more of a chance of swallowing something that might puncture their lung. It could be a big thorn, possibly a nail. And I've seen it after we check the lungs and we find it's there. Now, the animal was still alive and kicking, literally, uh, before we slaughtered it. But the sages felt an animal like that could not survive for much longer because eventually something's going to happen because of that the puncturing of the lung. And there could be other things. That's why, for instance, it was a big issue. Should animals in kosher, according to kosher rules, can they be stunned before they're slaughtered? It does, of course, cause the animal to be more docile, easier to do the dirty work. Um, and they have these big, whether it's cattle prods and I've seen pigs being electrocuted, and squealing and screaming. It's horrible to hear it. Um, so, yeah, according to all Jewish authorities, you're not allowed to shock the animal before slaughtering. The idea was, especially if it's going to make the animal collapse, because one of the signs of a healthy animal was could it get off the truck or the store or whatever it was and walk on its own. And I actually saw animals that had been transported for hours on backs of trucks. And when they offload them or unload them, with ramps or whichever way they do that, some of the animals just collapse from dehydration. What do they do with those animals? The non-kosher slaughters, they immediately drag it into the slaughterhouse before it dies or it gets sick and they cut its throat or whatever they do. In Jewish tradition, the animals that can't walk on their own, we don't eat them. We don't eat them. We might put them out of their misery and feed them to the dogs or whatever, but we won't eat them. And I saw that, and occasionally I said, that animal I don't want. Now, again, you might feed, maybe it's just dehydrated. So give it something to drink, wait a few hours, but usually you don't have time for that in modern industry. So either way, treifa is when the animal is dying. There are other defects also that are listed in Jewish tradition. Whether it's, realize Rabbi Cherki wrote it's unfit. He didn't write it's unhealthy, just unfit. Not too many animals that have, what's it, hoof and mouth and other, other things like that, crazy cow, whatever. That's something that no rational person should want to eat those. But even so this is something you want to keep this, you can keep this. Second, not to eat animals or birds that died without being slaughtered by human beings. So how did they die? Well, maybe old age. Maybe they were attacked by another animal. And maybe they had a defect, something that they were sick. So again, Jews won't eat, or kosher, people who keep kosher, and that's part of the checking that the ritual slaughter or the Jewish kosher packing house or slaughterhouse is supposed to check. Um, Next one, not to eat any of the animals forbidden to a Jew. This is what I mentioned before, as they are listed in the book of Leviticus. Frank, in your area, do people eat hares and rabbits?
It's not as popular as it was when I was growing up. But yeah, they still do.
Okay, I can understand as pigs are, as swine is. It's much easier. First of all, to hunt the rabbits and hares, they multiply very quickly, and I assume anywhere they're breeding, you just have to hunt them, trap them, and so on. And it's ready meat, especially when the world was much poorer. People were much poorer, most people in the world. So I can definitely understand, and that's why the Torah allows people to eat that, not Jews. Same thing with pigs. Pigs are easy to fatten up. They fatten very quickly, and you don't need a big pig for it to be ready, fattened, and I assume tasty. So again, in Leviticus, and this I see 293 is where he'll tell us the chapter and verse. Again, Noahide wants to keep these laws, so look them up, and you can see which animals. Again, the domesticated animals that Jews shouldn't eat, according to the Torah: pigs, rabbits, hares. I'm thinking of mammals. What else? I think most people aren't going to eat a donkey or a camel or a horse that are mentioned there. Um, is it easy to stay away from these things? I think there's so much food out there, you don't have to worry about it. Second, not to eat mixed with milk or any other dairy products. I mentioned a cheeseburger. Some, I think, soups, spaghetti bolognese, I think has meat in it and cheese. So, of course, according to the laws of kosher, three times in the Torah, in the Pentateuch, it says you should not mix the milk of the kid with its mother's milk, or not mix the meat with the. And the rabbis understood that it's being repeated three times to. First of all, it's not only the kid, a goat, and not exclusively forbidden only with its actual mother's milk. It means any milk with any red meat, we'll call it, with any mammal's flesh. Again, why? No idea why. The Torah on certain things doesn't give us any reason. And this would be considered a ritual, sort of, if you want, law. We don't know why. There have been people that have tried to guess or whatever, but the Torah says it very clearly. No way to get around it. We can manage without mixing meat and milk. And again, observant Jews won't ever mix that. Not only that, in our homes, we keep separate plates, separate dishes, plates, pots, frying pans, cutlery, silverware. Some for meat, there's for meat, and others for dairy products, and they're kept in separate drawers, separate cabinets in the kitchen, so we don't mix them up. When you start this, some Jews who decide to return to these laws, and we hope that all will, that's what God wants of us. At the beginning, it seems a bit complicated. You used to go into the kitchen, you take a spoon, eating some cereal, having some soup. You just take a spoon out of the cup, out of the drawer, and whatever. Now to start thinking, no, it's not that spoon, it's the other spoon. So at the beginning, we recommend you put a sticker on the drawer that has the meat utensils and another one that has the dairy ones. Whether, again, a Noahide isn't obligated to do any of this. So you choose the level of separation that you want to do, if you want to do it at all. There was a famous rabbi, you can look him up online, Mordechai Kaplan. Mordechai Kaplan, Rabbi Dr. Mordechai Kaplan. He had a doctorate, I think, in the sciences and physics. He was a brilliant thinker. He died relatively young, I think, in his 40s, and I think he died about 50 years ago. And one of his explanations,
New
and one of
York,
his,
New
not
York.
related to me, not related to me. I wish he was. I wish I could claim kinship to him. And I get asked that question quite a bit. But Kaplan, there are a lot of Jews that are called Kaplan. So he gave the reason that milk represents life, because that's what every mammal, female mother, sustains and gives life to its offspring through the milk of the mother. And meat is, part of me, is dead flesh, right? We kill the animal so we can eat it. Mixing the notions of death and life, or not mixing them, is a reminder to us that that we should respect life, which the milk symbolizes that and reminds us of that. We're allowed to eat the meat, but we want to live long lives in the service of Hashem. That means live long lives observing and trying to be favorable, find favor in the eyes of God. How do we do that? Be upstanding, honest, compassionate, help others, don't offend others, don't hurt others, and trying to make this world a better world. And it could be through your job, if you in the services and you're helping people that come to your office or whatever, and you're friendly to them and helping them in their times of need. That's also service of God. Society, we all need that. We need bank clerks. We need people in the post office, right? We need those things to have a pleasant society. So if you see that I'm going to work, first of all, to sustain my family, I need the money. I'm not going to rely on those. I don't want to rely on whatever it is, handouts. So that's already, because that's what God wants. He wants us cultivating and expanding and developing this world and improving society, let alone that you have money also to give some charity. And first, charity begins at home, your own families. And then if you have other jobs, teacher, fireman, policeman, even in the military, you're doing things to protect our lives, your own lives, and the lives of families in your country, then that's God's service. But the little things also matter. Not offending other people, supporting, smiling to other people, and that's a big thing. I on the airplane, for instance, getting on and getting off, I always say thank you to the air crew. I say how much I appreciate their service. If they gave me good service, even if they didn't, I'll say thank you, goodbye. But don't treat them as transparent. I know this is my brother, my eldest brother, who passed away after years of serving for Delta Airlines. And I know from him how hard and frustrating the job is because you have people watching you the whole time, evaluating you, and there are always going to be people that are complainers. On the other hand, he was always kind to people, friendly, and so on. So I try to be careful to those people too, and to anybody like that that's giving me service. And that's also part of serving God. So again, not to eat, mix, or not to mix meat with milk, is you could say as a way of reminding us, if you remember conscious of it, that milk represents life and everybody's life, not just my own life, my family's life. Every person, human being, was born a son to someone and is loved by God. God might be disappointed with them, but it's a way of reminding ourselves of these things and to be careful with other people's lives. Don't drive under the influence. Don't or where you're too tired, you might hurt somebody. Of course, texting while you're driving. It's not just the police or the authorities. There's a reason for it. Don't go too much over the limit. Don't drive recklessly because you're risking people's lives. And death is horrible when it comes prematurely. Okay, so we finished chapter 8. I think we'll stop now. I hope you've enjoyed the class. And again, Frank, thank you for organizing this. Um, I've had some thoughts while I was away, how important it is to bring people together. The people I was meeting are so distant from my way of life and probably your way of life. But we're so different in the world in many ways, but there are a lot of things definitely between countries in the developing world that we're very similar, even if we have different beliefs. I saw families there, poor families, middle class, probably some wealthy people, and family is family, and that's probably the biggest problem that we have or biggest challenge that we have. How do we raise our families properly? That means um, protecting and cultivating our relationships with our spouses and our children. Hopefully, they will be at peace with one another and they'll be loving between them. It ain't easy, right? It takes commitment and it takes a lot of and forethought, and we all make mistakes. But our children hopefully recognize our mistakes and that we're only human, even though at the beginning, when we're young, they think we're super people, supermen, super women. But I think they get it if you're honest about it and not doubling down on your mistakes. Admit it. Yeah, I made a mistake. I made a bad mistake. And I hope you won't make that mistake because I learned from my mistake. So these things are important. And it's interesting, no matter who you are in the world, right? We're human creatures. Sadly, many young people in the modern age, definitely in the Western world, don't want to have children or want to have one child, and that's enough. Um, I think, I don't know if they're going to regret it, but I think it's a poor life, I think. I'm not judging them. I'm judging their way of living, their style of living. I think there's great joy in having a spouse, having children. Now I've been blessed with grandchildren. I can honestly say it's my greatest joy, for myself and my wife. We see how our kids are growing up, and we have good relations with them, Baruch Hashem. And I miss them when I'm away. I'm also pleased that when I do my job as a rabbi, whatever I'm serving in, I hope I'm doing a good job. You also need you need professional also compliments or feel that you're doing something worthy. But in the end, I know that my greatest work for Hashem is the children that we have raised and the grandchildren. Of course, I meet people, neighbors in the synagogue, in the service. I'm always trying to say good morning, smile at somebody. And if you ask them how they're doing, they give you their whole life's history in the medical history, and you say, "Oh my God, what have I done?" But you know what? We would want somebody to listen to us, and there are people out there that are depressed and feel lonely. So, we call it's a mitzvah. The greatest mitzvah is how to help another human being. Do you have anything you want to say, Frank, before we finish for this week?
I was just going to say, Rabbi, you referenced Leviticus in one of the statements there. It gave the reference of 293 down at the bottom. Throughout, if you have the book, throughout the book, you may come across this I bid at the
Yeah,
bottom.
okay. Yeah.
Some people may not know what that means.
Okay.
It's an abbreviation for Latin, and it just means the book that they referenced before. So in this case, it's down low. It means go back to Leviticus.
Well, you go back to the previous book mentioned.
Yes, yeah.
Sometimes they even sometimes write ibid or whatever it's pronounced, which means not only the book, the same book mentioned before previously, it's also the same chapter. I guess it was a way to save ink or to save, especially when they were writing, copying things by hand. It was a way of saving ink and saving labor. But sometimes it's, the four letters IBID is longer than the, Leviticus. You can just abbreviate LEV.
Yeah.
Or the chapters is sometimes one digit, one number, or maybe even two. So it doesn't always make practical sense to use the IBID. Um, whether this was put through a translate, his book, he wrote it, I think, in Hebrew, Rabbi Cherki, the author of
Mhm.
this book. And it was translated, it's English, French, and Dutch, Italian, Turkish, I think, many languages, usually by local people. Now, as he doesn't go out to translate himself, they ask for permission. Can they translate it? He says yes, and I think then he asks for a copy so that he can check and whatever. Okay, so God bless you all. Shalom. Hope you're all warm. Here it's getting chilly, but not yet. We're still praying for rain. There has been rain already. But let's just say God's blessing. Let's hope God looks down upon all of us and all the world, but especially the people that are working in his office or working in his cause. Bless us more so we can do more of God's work here. And there's no embarrassment or no shame to say, God, I want to enjoy life, right? I want to have a good life in your service. I don't have to be a suffering servant. Pardon me for borrowing that term that's been distorted by Christianity. Is no, we don't look for that. We don't have to be that way. We hope that we have to serve God no matter what. We hope that God uh, will bless us, so that we can serve God with joy, with happiness, with health for ourselves and for our families. So God bless you all. Look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.
Thank you,
Shalom from
Rabbi.
Israel.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for your time. Happy
Bye bye.
Thanksgiving, to all of you that are
Happy
celebrating.
Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanking God for whatever reason. Well, they're for the,
Oh,
you know what? Thank God for the United States of America, and that
amen.
taught the world a lot of good things and probably some bad, but taught the world a lot of good things. And let's be honest, where would we all be if it wasn't for the founding fathers and those brave people, for whatever reason, they were rejected, expelled from Europe, or they felt uncomfortable. They braved the voyage, they braved the unknown, they created or they began with seeds to create a amazing country, the United States, with all its problems. But you know what? Where would the world be if it hadn't been for the United States? We would be speaking German, maybe, or who knows what would be doing. So we have to help the United States be a better country, a better moral country, more tolerant. And you know what? That doesn't mean laying down before the enemies that are knocking or banging at the gates to get in and change these values. And that's what's happening in Western democracy, where because of the compassion and the liberalism, if you want, of many, they said, these people are poor people. We should let them all in. We should let them in, but carefully. We should make sure they want to be Americans. What does it mean to be American? I think there are certain values, whether it's understand and accept the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and accept that there's a certain style or certain values that the American society is based on, as well as other Western democracies. If they're willing, if we're sure, that's why they want to come here. Then and they're going to adapt to that with whatever religion or belief system they have. That's fine. But if they're coming to change these Western democracies, then my personally, sorry, go somewhere else. The absurd thing is they're running away from these countries that have are based on these destructive notions and values and principles and behavior, ways to behave. And now they're trying, and they're looking to escape for safe haven and better lives in countries like the United States, like other European countries, and they're trying to change them into the countries they escaped.
Yeah.
It's absurd. No, it's not all of them, not all of them, definitely not. But I think
Oh.
all the Western democracies should be more careful about these things.
It used to be law in the United States. I'm not sure if it still is, but you had to assimilate. You had to learn English, you had to learn customs, everything. But I don't know, things changed. So
Listen, I wouldn't, anybody that, they should be, I think, I don't know how long the green card status is. But I think during that time, you want to see that the person has made efforts to learn English, to learn about the United States, American history, definitely the Constitution, which is a brilliant work. The more I read in it and learn, it's just amazing what the founding fathers, with all their faults, they weren't superhuman, but they were clever, wise people. I think their hearts and consciences were in the right direction. And it's an amazing document, and I think people should learn what it is. People want to be Americans. So they'll say, well, Americans don't know what it is. Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of ignorance out there, but you want to become one of us. So therefore, you want to enjoy the rights that we have here, then you have to show the willingness to become, to assimilate, as you said, to become one of us. I think Western leaders have to wake up if they haven't, and they have to explain it to the people. It's not, we have nothing, it's not racist. It's not racism. We just want to make sure the way we have our lifestyle now, we want to improve it, but we don't want it destroyed and brought down. So therefore, let's make sure the people we're letting in are in accordance with this. All right, it's a totally different subject, but God bless you all. Enjoy Thanksgiving. Thank God, right? In Thanksgiving. Don't forget to thank God at the table. Okay, enjoy
Thank
the
you, Rabbi.
turkey.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you,
God
Brita.
bless. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom.